50 lovers? Yes, you heard that right. My husband had 50 lovers during our marriage, and I discovered all of them at once. But what I did afterward will truly surprise you. Hello, my name is Dorothy Magnolia. I'm 93 years old, and I'm here to share a story I've kept in my heart for a long time. Before I begin, I'd like to ask you watching to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the Grandma's Diary channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. That would make me very happy. Now, let's get to my story. It was 1973, and I was 43 years old. America was changing during those years, while I was living in a marriage I thought was as solid as a rock. We were in the midst of the Watergate scandal, gas shortages, and economic uncertainty. But the real scandal was what was happening under my own roof. I lived in a beautiful house in the best neighborhood in town. I had 3 grown children, all studying away from home. And my husband, Arnold Vance, was considered a respectable man in our community. He owned a fine furniture store downtown that was doing very well. Everyone admired him. Women found him elegant, and men wanted to be like him. Always in a well-pressed suit, polished shoes, and impeccably combed hair with Brill-Cream, as was fashionable at the time. Our house was one of those with a separate living room and dining room, with a china cabinet full of porcelain that I only used on special occasions. We had a record player where I would play Elvis Presley and Frank Sinatra records while knitting on Sunday afternoons. Our grown children, Paul, 23, Regina, 21, and Claude, 19, were all studying in different cities. Paul was studying engineering, Regina medicine, and Claude law. I was so proud of them. They were the reason I woke up with a smile every day, even when Arnold spent weeks saying he needed to travel on business. Back then, it wasn't like today where women work outside the home and have their independence. I was what they called a homemaker. I took care of everything: the food on the table, the always clean and ironed clothes, the house that needed to be impeccable for when Arnold's friends came to dinner. I participated in the church ladies' club, did volunteer work, and was known for my dessert recipes, especially the flan that everyone requested at birthday parties. You might think, but Mrs. Dorothy, you had a good life, didn't you? Oh, my dears, life isn't just what you see on the outside. It's like those beautiful fruits at the market that when you open them at home, they're all bruised inside. My marriage to Arnold began like a dream. We met in 1949 at a church 4th of July picnic. I was 19 and he was 22. Arnold arrived in a suit despite the July heat, with that confident manner of someone who knows what he wants. We danced together, and when he held my hand, I felt a shiver I had never felt before. We dated for 6 months, were engaged for another 6, and married in a ceremony that, by the standards of the time in our small town, was considered luxurious. The first years were happy, or at least I thought they were. We had our children in sequence. And while I dedicated myself to raising them, Arnold built his furniture store. He started small, just reselling pieces from other manufacturers, but soon began making custom furniture. He said he had an eye for business, and indeed, the store prospered quickly. As the years passed, Arnold began to travel more. He said he needed to go to New York to find new suppliers, to North Carolina to see quality woods, to Chicago for exhibitions. At first, he brought small gifts from these trips: a scarf, a simple pair of earrings, a music box. Over time, the gifts became rarer, as did the calls during the trips. My mother, who lived with us in the last years of her life, always told me, "Child, a man who travels a lot is a man who has something to hide." But I would retort, defending Arnold, "Mom, he's working to provide comfort for us. Don't you see how our children have the best of everything?" Today I realize that my mother, with her wisdom from having lived a long life, saw what I refused to see. There were signs, of course, there always are. The different perfume that sometimes lingered on his shirt collars, even after I washed them. The calls he would answer and quickly hang up when I entered the room. The weekends he said he needed to go to the store to resolve urgent problems. The way he gradually stopped looking me in the eyes when we talked. And then there was the attic. Ah, the attic of our house. Arnold always said I shouldn't go up there because of my asthma. Dorothy, that place has too much dust. It will make you sick. Let me take care of things up there. And I, always concerned about my fragile health, never questioned. In 24 years of marriage, I never climbed those stairs. Can you believe that? A part of my own house that was forbidden to me, and I accepted it without question. In those days, we learned from an early age that dirty laundry is washed at home and that the woman is responsible for maintaining the marriage. So I carried on, pretending everything was fine, organizing dinners for Arnold's friends, participating in charity events beside him, being the perfect wife everyone expected me to be. I clearly remember our 20th wedding anniversary. I organized a surprise party for Arnold, inviting all close friends and family. I spent weeks planning every detail: the menu, the decoration, the music. I chose a new dress, turquoise blue. I had my hair done at the salon. I felt beautiful for the first time in a long time. When Arnold arrived and saw everyone shouting surprise, he smiled, but I saw something in his eyes. It was as if he were playing a role. He hugged me, thanked me for the effort, but throughout the night, I noticed he barely stayed by my side. Later, I found out, through whispered comments, that he spent most of the time talking with the new secretary from the store, a young woman named Marcia. That night, when everyone had left and we were lying in bed, I asked if he had enjoyed the party. "It was good, Dorothy. You tried really hard," he said, turning his back to me and turning off the bedside lamp. There was no goodnight kiss, no affection. It was at that moment that I felt a crack in my heart, like those fine cracks that appear in old porcelain. But like the good wife I was taught to be, I swallowed my tears and carried on. The years went by, the children left home, and I became increasingly alone in that big house with a husband who was physically present but emotionally distant. Telephones also changed during that time. At the beginning of our marriage, we had one of those heavy black phones, and we needed to talk to the operator to make calls. Then came the rotary phone, and it was possible to dial directly. I remember our house number, 34162. It was common to receive calls for Arnold, usually from clients or suppliers, or at least that's what I thought. We also had that huge television, one of those that looked like a piece of furniture with wooden legs. We watched the evening news together, and then each went their own way. I liked soap operas. At that time, All in the Family was on CBS, one of the most popular shows in America. Arnold said that was women's programming, and would go to his office to read the newspaper or make his work notes. Our routine was marked by silences. We had breakfast together, but each reading their part of the newspaper. We rarely had lunch together, as he spent the day at the store. We had dinner in silence, only commenting on the news or some neighborhood gossip. On Sundays, he played cards with friends at the club while I visited my friends or stayed home doing some handicraft. That was the life I thought I had. A marriage that had cooled over time, as they said happened to all couples after many years together. A comfortable life, but without great emotions. A predictable, organized existence, respectable in the eyes of society. Until one Tuesday in September 1973, the phone rang. I answered, and a female voice asked for Arnold. I said he was at the store as usual. The young woman thanked me and hung up. I didn't think much about it until 2 hours later the doorbell of our house rang. I was preparing a roast for dinner with my hands dirty with seasoning. I quickly wiped them on a dish towel and went to answer. When I opened the door, I saw a very beautiful young woman, black hair loose on her shoulders, wearing a flowered dress that was fashionable at that time. She must have been about 25, no more than that. She carried an expensive leather purse, and between her delicate fingers dangled a blue silk scarf. I immediately recognized that scarf. I had given it to Arnold on our wedding anniversary a few months earlier. It was a fine, imported scarf that I bought at the only luxury goods store in our town. It cost me 3 months of saving from the allowance Arnold gave me for household expenses. That young woman's smile was confident, almost intimate, as if we had known each other for years. "You must be Arnold's sister," she said, with a naturalness that left me breathless. He's told me so much about you." At that moment, I felt my heart accelerate and my hands go cold. "Sister!" I was 15 years older than Arnold, but not so much to be mistaken for his sister. I realized he had lied to this woman, lied about who I was. And something inside me, perhaps a morbid curiosity, perhaps an instinct for self-preservation, made me decide at that instant. I was going to find out how far that lie went. "Yes, that's me," I replied, forcing a smile. "How can I help you?" She extended the blue scarf to me. "Could you give him this note? Tell him the weekend in Spring Valley was unforgettable." "Sis," that "sis" at the end of the phrase, said with a tone of complicity, was like a stab. Spring Valley was a tourist resort 60 miles from our town, known for its hot springs and romantic hotels. Arnold had told me he spent the previous weekend in New York, at a furniture fair, but something in me, perhaps wounded pride, made me continue that farce. "Of course, dear. Arnold will be delighted to know you stopped by." She smiled, relieved that I seemed so understanding, and continued. "He's going to pick up the watch he left with me on Thursday. I'm traveling to the coast and need to know whether to wait or not." "Ah, yes," I replied, as if I knew exactly what she was talking about. "He mentioned that at breakfast, and that gift he promised for my birthday. He said it would be something special from that French jewelry store." Each word was like a needle piercing my already aged heart from years of indifference. But I just kept collecting information, maintaining a smile that cost me all the dignity I had left. "Don't worry," I said, holding the scarf and the note. "I'll make sure he knows all this." She said goodbye with a kiss in the air, got into a yellow Volkswagen Beetle parked in front of the house, and left. I closed the door, and with trembling legs walked to the stairs and sat on the bottom step. The blue scarf in my hands seemed to weigh tons. It was at this moment that something broke inside me. It wasn't just silent tears running down my face. It was as if decades of self-deception were crumbling. 24 years of marriage, 3 children raised, an entire life dedicated to that man. And I was, what? The official fool. The wife that all his friends must have ridiculed behind my back? I remembered all the times I defended Arnold when my friends insinuated he might not be faithful. "You don't know Arnold," I would say. "He's a family man dedicated to his work." How naive. Or was it denial? At that moment, sitting on the stairs with a blue scarf in my hands and my heart in pieces, I made the decision that would change the course of my life. I was going to discover the whole truth, no matter how painful it might be. Little did I know that the truth would be much worse than anything I could imagine. After that young woman left, I sat on those stairs for almost an hour with the blue scarf between my trembling fingers. You can't imagine the storm that was happening inside my chest. It was as if my entire life was being rewritten at that moment. Each memory, each business trip, each mysterious phone call took on a new meaning. I dried my tears and went back to the kitchen. The roast I was preparing was almost burning. I turned off the oven, looked at that food that Arnold would probably not even notice the taste of, and had a revelation. The attic, that place forbidden to me for 24 years because of my fragile respiratory health. "Dorothy, you shouldn't go up there. The dust will trigger your asthma," he always said. And I, like a fool, believed. Or perhaps I chose to believe because the truth would be too painful. I went up the stairs to the second floor of the house with determination. At the end of the hallway was a small wooden door that led to the attic. I'll never forget the creak of those rusty hinges when I pulled the cord and opened the door. A narrow staircase was revealed, ascending into darkness. I felt along the wall and found the switch. A weak light illuminated the space, revealing exactly what Arnold had always described. A dusty place, full of old boxes, ancient suitcases, and broken furniture we no longer used. Dust danced in the rays of light that entered through the small roof windows. I began to explore that forbidden place, stepping carefully on the boards that creaked under my feet. There were boxes with Christmas decorations we hadn't seen in years, old clothes of the boys, family photo albums. All very normal. Exactly what you would expect to find in a family home's attic. I was almost giving up when I noticed something strange. In a corner, behind an old wardrobe, there was a dark wooden chest that stood out from everything there. It was an elegant chest, well preserved, with details in gold metal. It didn't look like something that would be thrown in a dusty attic and had a small padlock closing it. I stared at that chest for a few minutes. My heart told me to open it, but my head argued that perhaps it would be better not to know. Have you ever felt that? That moment when you're facing a truth that can change everything, and part of you wants to back away? I decided I needed to see. I had spent too much time living with my eyes closed. The padlock was a problem, but I remembered that Arnold always kept spare keys in a small box inside the nightstand drawer. I quickly went down, went to our bedroom, and opened the drawer. There was the mother-of-pearl box that we received as a wedding gift. Inside it were several small keys, some that I didn't even know what they were for. I tried 5 different keys before one of them, golden and tiny, fit perfectly in the chest's padlock. When I opened it, I was greeted by a different smell. It wasn't the smell of mold or old things that predominated in the attic. It was a mixture of old paper and perfumes. Various different perfumes that over the years had impregnated the contents of that chest. Inside, everything was meticulously organized. There were folders labeled with female names organized by year. Celeste, 1950-1952. Marina, 1953. Beatrice, 1954, 1956. Each folder contained letters, photographs, notes, small gifts. Some had locks of hair, embroidered handkerchiefs, even feminine, intimate items. My fingers trembled as I opened those folders. The first was from 1950, just 1 year after our wedding. Celeste was blonde, young, smiling. There were photos of her in provocative poses, passionate letters, movie tickets glued to pages of a diary that Arnold kept, describing in detail their encounters. Today, Celeste wore that red dress that I like so much. We met at the hotel at 3 p.m., as usual. Dorothy thinks I'm at the meeting with suppliers. Reading that was like being slapped, not just for the betrayal, but for the coldness with which he documented everything, like a collector cataloging his rare pieces. I moved on to the next folder, and the next, and the next. Marina, Beatrice, Clarice, Solange, Irene, Mary, each with her history, her letters, her photos. Some lasted years, others only a few months. There were women of all ages, professions, physical types. It was as if Arnold was building an album of female diversity. And I was just the official wife, the respectable facade for his double life, or better, his multiple lives. The hours passed as I immersed myself in that archive of betrayals. The attic light was weak and my eyes burned, both from tears and from the effort of reading those yellowed letters. But I couldn't stop. It was like a car accident, horrible to see but impossible to look away. One folder caught my attention especially. Lucille, 1965. I opened it and immediately recognized that face. She was our oldest son Paul's math teacher, a serious woman with glasses who came to dinner at our house regularly to discuss Paul's academic progress. Or at least that's what I thought. The photos and letters showed another Lucille without the glasses, with her hair down, smiling seductively at the camera. And the worst, some photos were taken in our house, in my own living room, on my own sofa, while I was visiting my sick mother in another city. My stomach turned. I felt nausea, anger, humiliation. How many of these women had been in my house? How many had sat at my table, eaten food that I prepared, smiled at me while exchanging complicit glances with my husband? At the bottom of the chest, I found a black notebook, a kind of index. In it, Arnold had listed all the women in alphabetical order, with dates, meeting places, and small observations about each one. Some had stars next to their name, like a perverse rating. Others had comments like, very jealous, or easy to manipulate. I leafed through that notebook with a mixture of horror and morbid fascination. That's when I reached the last page and saw the numbers. Arnold had made a count, 50 names, 50 women over 24 years of marriage, an average of 2 per year. Some overlapped temporally, which meant there were periods when he maintained 3 or 4 affairs simultaneously. The most recent folder was Veronica's, the young woman who had appeared at my door that afternoon. According to the notes, they had been together for 6 months. She was a secretary at an accounting firm, was 24 years old, and Arnold had met her at a business fair. Her photos were more daring than the others, colored, recent. There were receipts from a hotel in Spring Valley and passionate notes. In one of them, she wrote, "I can't wait for the day when you will leave your sister and we will live together." Sister? So that's what he told them, that I was his older sister with whom he needed to live to take care of, because I had health problems. What absurdity, what sordid lie. And these women believed or pretended to believe because it suited them. It was already getting dark when I finally closed the last folder. My eyes were burning, my throat was dry, and I felt a pain in my chest that wasn't physical, but that hurt as if it were. I reorganized everything exactly as it was. I closed the chest with the padlock and went down the attic stairs. In the bathroom, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were red, my face stained with tears, my hair disheveled. I seemed to have aged 10 years that afternoon, but something in my eyes had changed. It was no longer the look of the naive and submissive Dorothy. It was a hard, determined look. I took a hot shower, trying to wash away not just the dust from the attic, but all the filth I had just discovered. I dressed carefully, combed my hair, applied a discreet lipstick. When Arnold arrived, he wouldn't find a devastated wife. He would find an apparently normal woman, preparing dinner as she always had, because I needed time. Time to process all that, time to decide what to do, and, mainly, time to plan. At 7:30, as usual, I heard the front door open. The familiar footsteps in the entrance hall, the document portfolio being placed on the table, the coat being hung on the coat rack. "Dorothy, is dinner ready?" His voice, which used to bring me comfort, now caused me repulsion. But I smiled, as I always did. "Yes, Arnold. I'm just finishing setting the table." He entered the kitchen, loosening his tie. He looked at me with that distracted look he always had, without really seeing me. "Any news today?" It was the question he always asked out of courtesy, without really caring about the answer. Normally I would say, "Nothing special," or tell some triviality about the day. But that night something in me wanted to test, to provoke, to see how far he would go with his lies. "A young woman came here today looking for you. Young, beautiful, dark hair. She left this for you." I extended the blue scarf with the note. I saw his face pale slightly, but he recovered quickly. He took the scarf with studied naturalness. "Ah, it must be Cardoso's daughter, that client who ordered the complete dining room set. He said his daughter would stop by to leave some specifications." He lied. The lie came so easily from his lips that I wondered how many times he had done this before. Thousands, probably. "She mentioned something about a weekend in Spring Valley," I said, keeping my voice casual as I set the silverware on the table. He hesitated for a second, just 1 second, before responding. "She must be confused. Cardoso has a country house near Spring Valley, but I haven't been there. I was in New York, at the furniture fair, as I told you." I nodded, pretending to believe. "Of course, that must be it. Dinner is ready. Let's eat." Throughout the meal, I observed him as I had never done before. Every gesture, every expression, every word. It was as if I was seeing a stranger sitting across from me, a man who had shared my bed for 24 years, but whom I didn't really know. As we ate that roast that had almost burned, an idea began to form in my head. An idea that days before I would never have considered. But now, after spending hours in that attic, after discovering the extent of Arnold's betrayal, after realizing that I had wasted the best decades of my life with a man who never respected me, Now this idea didn't seem so absurd. In fact, it seemed perfectly fair. That night, lying next to Arnold, who slept deeply, without any weight on his conscience, I began to plan my revenge. It wouldn't be something impulsive driven by momentary anger. It would be calculated, patient, precise, like a Swiss watch, those that Arnold so admired. Because you see, discovering that your husband had one mistress is devastating. Discovering that he had two is unbearable. But discovering that he had 50-50 women catalogued like collectible pieces, that doesn't just break your heart, it completely transforms you. And that's how, at 43, after 2 decades of being the perfect wife, the dedicated mother, the impeccable homemaker, I transformed. The old Dorothy died in that dusty attic, along with the illusions of my marriage. And a new woman was born, one who would no longer accept emotional crumbs, one who would no longer live on appearances, one who would take the reins of her own destiny. A woman who would make Arnold Vance bitterly regret each of those 50 betrayals. And it would all begin with an apparently innocent event, a public tribute to the great businessman everyone admired. For 3 days, I couldn't sleep properly. The images of those folders, those women, those letters wouldn't leave my head. I would lie beside Arnold, listening to his quiet breathing, and wonder how he managed to sleep so well carrying so many lies. He seemed so at peace while I was torn apart inside. Can you imagine what it's like to look at someone who shared your bed for 24 years and suddenly see a complete stranger? It's as if everything you built, every memory, every happy moment was just a false scenario, like those in cinema that seem real from the front, but behind are just empty structures. On the morning of the 4th day after my discovery, Arnold left for the store as he always did. He distractedly kissed me on the forehead, picked up his brown leather briefcase, a gift I had given him the previous Christmas, and left. The sound of his blue metallic Oldsmobile starting up was as familiar as the ticking of the living room clock. A routine of decades, but that wouldn't be a morning like the others. I picked up the phone and called the city's travel agency. "Good morning. I'd like to reserve a bus ticket to New York for tomorrow early morning." The man on the other end of the line seemed surprised. "Mrs. Dorothy, are you traveling alone?" That was the curse of living in a small town like ours. Everyone knew everyone, and a wife traveling without her husband was almost a scandal. "Yes, I'm going to visit my daughter Regina. I need a few days in the big city." It wasn't a complete lie. Regina really did live in New York studying medicine, but I wasn't just going to visit her. I had other plans. After making the reservation, I began to separate some clothes. Nothing special, just enough for 3 days. While folding a blouse, I found at the bottom of the drawer that red velvet box that held the only valuable item I inherited from my mother, a gold brooch with small diamonds in the shape of a flower. She gave it to me shortly before she died, saying, "Keep this for when you need to start over, my child." At the time, I didn't understand what she meant. Now, with the brooch between my fingers, her words made perfect sense. That afternoon, I went to the bank where Arnold and I had a joint account. The manager, Mr. Ferreira, received me with his usual cordiality. "Mrs. Dorothy, what a pleasant surprise. How is Mr. Arnold?" "He's very well, thank you. I need to make a withdrawal from our account." He adjusted his glasses, a little uncomfortable. Of course. How much would you like to withdraw?" "Half the balance." "Mr." Ferreira blinked several times, as if he hadn't understood. "Excuse me, Mrs. Dorothy, did you say half the balance?" "Exactly. It's for an investment that Arnold and I decided to make. He's very busy at the store and asked me to take care of this." Another lie. The words now came out of my mouth with an ease I never had before, a whole life being honest and respectful. And now there I was, lying with the tranquility of someone ordering a coffee. "Well, we would normally need his signature as well, but considering that you are long-time customers..." An hour later, I left the bank with a considerable amount of money. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough for what I was planning. I kept the money in different places, part in my purse, another sewn into the lining of a jacket, another hidden inside a book. Arnold would never notice. He rarely paid attention to my belongings. The next day, at 5 a.m., I discreetly boarded the bus to New York. Arnold was still sleeping when I left, leaving only a note on the kitchen table. Gone to visit Regina for a few days. There's food in the refrigerator. Dorothy. The trip to New York took almost 6 hours. The bus jolted on the dirt road in some stretches, and I looked out the window seeing the landscape change. Small villages, coffee plantations, then the larger cities, and finally the huge buildings of the big city. Just like the landscape, I felt that my life was changing drastically with each mile traveled. In New York, I didn't go straight to Regina's apartment. Instead, I took a taxi to a different bank, where I opened an account exclusively in my name. I deposited almost all the money, keeping just enough for the expenses of the next few days. Then, I went to a private detective agency that I found in the Yellow Pages. The office was in an old building downtown, in one of those elevators with a pantograph door that needed to be closed manually. The detective, Mr. Mendez, was a middle-aged man with deep eye bags and a thick mustache. When I told him what I needed, he showed no surprise. He had probably heard stories like mine hundreds of times. "Do you have names, addresses, any information that can help?" I opened my purse and took out a small notebook where I had written all the names I found in that attic index, along with the dates and any details about meeting places. Mr. Mendez's eyes widened slightly. "There are many names. 50 to be exact. I don't need information about all of them, just those from the last 5 years who might still be active." He leafed through the notebook, nodding. "I understand. And what exactly do you intend to do with this information?" I looked into his eyes with a serenity that surprised me. Just invite these women to a special event. I left the office with the promise that in a week he would have the information I needed. The price wasn't cheap, but it would be worth every penny. Finally, I went to Regina's apartment. My daughter was surprised by my unexpected visit, but happy to see me. She shared a small apartment with another medical student near the college. "Mom, why didn't you let me know you were coming? I would have cleaned the room better for you." I hugged my daughter tightly, feeling a lump in my throat. I wouldn't tell her the real reason for my visit. I didn't want to tarnish the image she had of her father, at least not yet. "It was a last-minute decision, dear. I was missing you and needed a few days in the big city." Regina didn't question much. She was busy with her studies and shifts at the university hospital. This gave me the freedom I needed to continue my plans. The next day, I visited an event planning agency. I wanted to organize something special, a tribute to Arnold for his entrepreneurship and contribution to the community. The young, enthusiastic woman who attended me wrote down every detail as I described the type of event I had in mind. "We want something elegant, but not excessively formal. A cocktail party for approximately 100 people, and we'll need a good photographer to record everything." "Of course, Mrs. Dorothy. And what will be the date?" I thought for a moment. I needed time to receive the information from the detective and make the preparations. 1 month from now, on October 15th. Perfect. We have the Excelsior Hotel ballroom available on this date. It's one of the most elegant in the city. I reserved the venue and left a cash deposit. The woman seemed a bit confused that I wasn't using a check or asking for an invoice for Arnold's company, but she didn't question it. Over the next 3 days, I visited various printing shops to order the invitations. I wanted something special, elegant, that wouldn't raise suspicions. Finally, I found the perfect model, parchment paper with gold edges and embossed letters. "We cordially invite you to an evening recognizing the business trajectory of Arnold Vance, a surprise organized with affection by his wife, Dorothy Magnolia." I ordered 100 regular invitations for friends, family, and business colleagues, and 50 special invitations, slightly different, which would be sent to special guests. At the printing shop, the young man who helped me seemed curious. "Wouldn't you like to wait for your husband to approve the model before printing?" I smiled with that new confidence that was growing in me. "It's a surprise for him, the 25th anniversary of the store." Another little lie. The store was 22 years old, not 25. But who would check? Before returning to my town, I stopped at the most expensive jewelry store on Fifth Avenue. Using part of the money I had reserved, I bought a men's watch from a famous Swiss brand. It was expensive, elegant, exactly the kind of thing Arnold would love. "Is it for a gift?" asked the salesman, already preparing a special package. "Yes, for a man who loves collecting valuable things." The salesman smiled without understanding the bitter irony in my words. I asked them to engrave a phrase on the back of the watch. "So you never run out of time." "With love, Dorothy." When I returned home, after almost a week away, Arnold seemed more concerned with the mess in the kitchen than with my prolonged absence. He barely asked about Regina or how my stay in New York had been. "The maid missed 3 days, Dorothy. The sink is full of dirty dishes." I, who would normally apologize and rush to fix everything, just replied, "I'm tired from the trip, Arnold. The dishes can wait until tomorrow." He looked at me surprised. Never before had I responded that way, prioritizing my rest over household chores. But he said nothing, just muttered something and went to the living room to watch television. In the following weeks, I put my plan into action. I received the detailed report from the detective by mail. Of the 50 women on the list, he managed to locate the current whereabouts of 32. Some had moved to other cities, others had married and changed their names, but most were still reachable. I began sending the special invitations. Each contained a personalized note, mentioning something specific that only that woman and Arnold would know, to ensure they understood that I knew exactly who they were, but in a subtle way that wouldn't scare them to the point of not attending. "Dear Marley, your presence is fundamental in this celebration. Arnold always mentions how important your support was during those afternoons at the Central Hotel in 1967. Or, dear Veronica, Arnold will be especially happy to see you again after those memorable days in Spring Valley." Each invitation was a small bomb disguised as cordiality. At the same time, I sent normal invitations to Arnold's friends, family, and business partners. Everyone was enthusiastic about the idea of a surprise tribute. Some even called to praise the initiative. "What a dedicated wife you are, Dorothy," said the wife of one of his partners. "If she only knew." Arnold suspected nothing. I had told him I was organizing a charity dinner for the church, and he, as always, showed no interest in women's affairs, as he called them. The week of the event arrived, and I was strangely calm. There was now a purpose in every movement of mine, a clarity I never had before. I bought a new dress for the occasion. Not the typical discreet dress I used to wear, but an elegant model in navy blue, which highlighted my silhouette and matched the pearl necklace I received from my mother. On the day of the event, I told Arnold he needed to wear his best suit, as we were going to an important dinner with potential investors for the store. "Why didn't you tell me before, Dorothy? I could have rescheduled my card game." "It came up last minute, dear, and these investors will only be in town today." He grumbled, but got dressed. When we were in the car on the way to the hotel, I noticed that he seemed nervous, checking his watch constantly. "Any problem, Arnold?" "No, nothing. Just worried about the time. I don't like being late for business appointments." I smiled internally. The truth was that he had probably arranged to meet one of his lovers later. Little did he know that many of them were already waiting for us at the hotel. We arrived at the venue at 8 p.m. sharp. The lobby was elegantly decorated, and a discreet banner announced, "Recognition Night, Arnold Vance." His face showed genuine surprise. "Dorothy, what is this?" "A surprise for you, dear. A tribute for your work and dedication all these years." He seemed genuinely moved. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for what was about to happen. Almost. We entered the main hall, where dozens of people applauded his arrival. Friends, family, partners, all smiling, congratulating him. Arnold was radiant, shaking hands, receiving pats on the back, thanking everyone. I observed everything from a corner, waiting. The special guests began to arrive in small groups. Some seemed confused, others curious. None of them knew the others would be there. The plan was working perfectly. The time for my revenge had finally come, and believe me, it would be unforgettable. Not just for Arnold, but for the entire town. The Excelsior Hotel ballroom shone that night. Crystal chandeliers reflected the golden light. Champagne glasses clinked, and the buzz of conversations filled the environment. I observed everything from a strategic corner, holding my own glass, which I had barely touched with my lips. I needed to be completely sober for what was about to happen. Arnold circulated through the hall like a king in his castle, dressed in his charcoal gray suit, custom-made in New York, with that tie pin he had inherited from his father. He smiled, greeted, received compliments. How comfortable he seemed in that role of respectable man. How well he played the character of dedicated husband, upright businessman, pillar of the community. More guests arrived. The hall was naturally divided into two groups. On one side, friends, family, and business colleagues. On the other, the special guests, who still hadn't understood exactly why they were there. Some knew each other from other social circles and were conversing politely. Others seemed out of place, occasionally consulting the clock, probably wondering when Arnold would notice them. I saw when Veronica, the young woman who had appeared at my door on that fateful day, entered the hall. She was dazzling, with a short red dress, very fashionable in 1973, with that asymmetrical hem and generous neckline. Her eyes scanned the environment until she found Arnold. She smiled but didn't approach, just waved discreetly like someone sharing a secret. Beside Arnold was Otto, his partner of almost 2 decades. Otto's wife, Carmen, held his arm and laughed at something my husband had just said. Poor Carmen. She didn't know that her name was also on my list. According to Arnold's notes, they had a brief affair in 1968 during a business trip to Chicago. Apparently, betraying even his best friend's wife wasn't a problem for my husband. The clock marked 9:15 p.m. It was time. I walked to the small stage that had been set up in the center of the hall. The waiter handed me the microphone, and I asked them to slightly lower the music. The conversations diminished, and eyes turned to me. Good evening, everyone. I immensely appreciate the presence of each of you on this very special night. My voice sounded firm, clear, without any tremor. It was as if another person was speaking through me, a stronger, determined, courageous Dorothy. As you know, we are here to celebrate Arnold Vance, a man who has dedicated his life to collecting experiences. Arnold smiled without understanding the double meaning of my words. Some guests nodded, interpreting that as a reference to his professional achievements. Some of you know him as a businessman, others as a friend or family member. I made a strategic pause, feeling the weight of the moment. But there is a special group here today, those who knew him in more intimate moments. Arnold's smile began to wither. His eyes scanned the hall, noticing for the first time how many women from his past were present. His face gradually paled. For almost 25 years, I believed I was married to a man dedicated to family and business, a man who deserved my respect, my devotion, my absolute loyalty. I took a few steps on the stage, ensuring everyone could see me clearly. But a few weeks ago, I discovered I was wrong, very wrong. I signaled to the waiter who was guarding near the back door. He nodded and disappeared for a moment. When he returned, 2 other employees accompanied him, carrying large panels covered with black fabric. What you are about to see is Arnold Vance's true collection. They're not fine furniture, nor art objects, nor valuable investments. It's something much more personal. The employees positioned the panels in a semicircle on the stage, still covered. Arnold took a step forward as if wanting to stop me, but he was paralyzed by shock, by uncertainty about what exactly I knew. Ladies, I continued, looking directly at the side where the lovers were gathered, meet each other. You are all part of the same collection. With a gesture, I indicated for the fabrics to be removed. The panels revealed themselves to be huge photographic murals, 50 women, 50 stories of betrayal arranged chronologically with names and dates. Copies of the photos I found in the attic, enlarged in vivid colors when possible. Some photos were just of smiling faces, others were more compromising. Hugs, kisses, sensual poses. The entire hall was in absolute silence for a few seconds. A dense, heavy, almost palpable silence. Then came the murmurs, gradually increasing until they transformed into exclamations of shock and indignation. "None of you was special," I continued, my voice piercing the growing noise. "None was the only one. You were just numbers in a catalog that my husband carefully kept in our attic." Chaos began to set in. Some women ran out, embarrassed. Others advanced furiously toward Arnold, demanding explanations. Husbands and fiancés who accompanied some of them seemed ready to resort to physical aggression. Otto, Arnold's partner, was livid, looking alternately at the mural and at his wife Carmen, whose photo was there, smiling sensually from a hotel room in Chicago. Arnold's mother, a 75-year-old lady who had always treated me coldly, fainted and needed to be supported by relatives. Our children weren't present. I had made sure they wouldn't be, inventing unavoidable commitments for each of them in their respective cities. Arnold was at the center of that hurricane, trying to defend himself, denying, shouting that it was all a lie, that I had gone crazy, but the evidence was there, exposed for everyone to see. There was no way to deny it. Among the furious crowd, I remained serene on the stage. There was one more thing to do. To complete this recognition night, I spoke into the microphone, raising my voice above the tumult. I would like to give a gift to the honoree. One of the waiters approached Arnold, carrying a small blue velvet box on a silver tray. Reluctantly, confused, humiliated, he took the box and opened it. It was the Swiss watch I had bought. Expensive, elegant, exactly the type he appreciated. Arnold looked at me, not understanding that gesture amid the chaos. "Turn it over," I instructed through the microphone. "Read the inscription." He turned the watch and read the engraving on the back. "So, you never run out of time. With love, Dorothy." Then I added for everyone to hear. "Time to think about each of the 50 women who passed through your life while I took care of our house, raised our children, and believed your lies." I descended from the stage with dignity, crossed the hall now in complete chaos, and left through the main door. In the hotel lobby, I handed the manager an envelope containing the full payment for the event and a generous tip for the employees who would have to deal with that situation. "Aren't you going to stay until the end?" he asked, perplexed. "My part is over," I replied. "The rest of the night belongs to them." I went out into the cold October night, feeling the fresh air on my face, like a liberating caress. A taxi was waiting, as I had previously arranged. I got into the vehicle and indicated the address of the small hotel where I had reserved a room. During the journey, I looked out the window at the city lights, feeling a mixture of emotions: relief, sadness, a certain satisfaction, and mainly, an overwhelming sensation of freedom. It was as if an enormous weight had been removed from my shoulders, the weight of a false marriage, of a life built on lies. I found out later, through reports from acquaintances who were present, that the night ended even more chaotically than I could have imagined. Otto had punched Arnold, breaking his nose. Two of the most recent lovers had gotten into a fight, pulling hair and tearing dresses. Someone called the police, who arrived to find the respectable businessman Arnold Vance, bleeding, humiliated, surrounded by dozens of angry people. The story spread through the town like wildfire. In a few days, it was impossible to walk the streets without hearing comments, without noticing the looks, the whispers. For a small, conservative community like ours, that was the scandal of the century. The consequences for Arnold were devastating. Otto dissolved the partnership immediately. Other business partners cut relations. Clients canceled orders. The store, which had been built over 2 decades, began to wither rapidly, but the social consequences were even worse. Arnold, who had always been treated with deference as a respected member of the community, became a pariah. Men didn't want to be seen with him, fearing the association. Women avoided him as if he were carrying some contagious disease. Even in church, that space that should be of forgiveness and welcome, he found only looks of disapproval. As for me, surprisingly, the reaction was different from what I expected. Instead of being treated as the betrayed wife, the poor thing who couldn't keep her husband, I received a wave of support, especially from the women in town. Women who perhaps also suspected their own husbands. Women who admired my courage to expose the truth instead of continuing to live the lie. A week after the event, I filed for divorce. In those days, getting divorced wasn't as simple as it is today. The divorce was a scandal in itself. Arnold's lawyer tried to argue that I had no right to anything, that I had publicly defamed my husband. My lawyer, a serious and competent man whom I hired even before the event, presented the evidence of the betrayals, photographs, letters, the testimony of the private detective, and argued that I had every right to expose the truth about my marriage. The judge, an older and traditionalist man, seemed uncomfortable with the whole case. It was evident that he approved neither of Arnold's betrayals nor of my public exposure of them, but the law was on my side. I received half of the assets, including the vacation house in Lake Placid, which Arnold rarely used. Our children were divided when they learned of the story. Paul, the oldest, initially took his father's side, arguing that men have needs and that I had exaggerated in my reaction. Regina, our middle daughter, firmly stood by my side, furious with her father for so many years of lies. Claude, the youngest, tried to remain neutral, suffering from seeing the family crumble. With time, even Paul realized the extent of his father's lies and reconsidered his position. Years later, he confessed to me that he always knew about some affairs, but never imagined they were so many, so systematic, so cold. I sold the house where we had lived for decades. I couldn't bear the idea of continuing to live under the same roof where so many lies had been built. With the money from the sale and my part in the separation, I bought a smaller, cozier house near the sea. It was there, in that little coastal town, whose name I won't reveal to preserve my current privacy, that I began a new life. Using part of the savings, I opened a small tea house, one of those with lace tablecloths and English porcelain to serve the customers. At first it was difficult. I had never managed a business, had never worked outside the home. I made mistakes, had moments of despair, thought about giving up, but something inside me had fundamentally changed. That submissive Dorothy, who accepted her destiny without questioning, had died in the dusty attic along with the illusions of my marriage. The tea house slowly gained clientele. Women from the town came not just for the tea and cakes that I prepared myself, but to talk, to share their own stories. It became a space of welcome, of friendship, of female solidarity. Over the years, we expanded to a small restaurant, serving light lunches and dinners on weekends. I hired employees, always women, many of them restarting their lives after divorces or widowhood. Together, we built more than a business. We built a community. Arnold? I learned that the store went completely bankrupt in less than a year after our separation. He tried to start over in another city, but his reputation followed him. The last reports I had indicated that he lived modestly alone, still trying to convince anyone who would listen that it was all a misunderstanding, a conspiracy of mine to destroy him. As for the 50 women who passed through his life, some also suffered the social consequences of the scandal. Marriages were destroyed, reputations tarnished. Others managed to explain themselves, rebuild their lives. Some even sought me out over the years to apologize or simply to share their versions of the story. The truth is that I don't hold a grudge against them. In most cases, they were just lonely, needy women who believed in the empty promises of a charming and convincing man. The real villain was always Arnold, with his frightening ability to lie, to manipulate, to live multiple lives without showing any remorse. Decades have passed. My hair has whitened, wrinkles have marked my face, my body no longer has the vitality of before. But when I look in the mirror, I see a woman who had the courage to start over at 43, who built her own life, independent, meaningful. My children eventually reconciled with me and with their father, each in their own way. I have 7 wonderful grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren who are the joy of my days. They all know my story, not as a shameful secret, but as an example that it's never too late to seek truth and dignity. And as for that night at the Excelsior Hotel, I never regretted it, not for a second. It was the moment I recovered my voice, my identity, my power. It was the night I stopped being Arnold's wife and became simply Dorothy Magnolia, woman, mother, entrepreneur, survivor. Now, at 93, sitting on the porch of my seaside house, with the sound of the waves as the soundtrack to my memories, I can say with certainty that Tuesday in September, when a young woman in a flowered dress knocked on my door carrying a blue scarf, was the day my life really began. You know, my dears, people often say that life begins at 40. For me, it began at 43, in a coastal town that became my refuge and my fresh start. When I arrived there in January 1974, I carried only 2 large suitcases, some boxes with personal items, and a heart that was still healing from the deep wounds of betrayal. The house I bought was 3 blocks from the beach. It was much smaller than the mansion where I lived with Arnold, but it had a special charm. Large windows that let in the sunlight, a small garden in the back where I planted my first roses, and a front porch that would become my favorite place to watch the sunset, with a cup of tea in my hands. The first months were the hardest. I would wake up in the middle of the night, disoriented, not recognizing where I was. I would look at the side of the bed and feel a mixture of relief and loneliness at not finding Arnold there. 24 years sleeping next to someone creates habits that don't disappear overnight, even when that someone broke your heart into 50 pieces. The nights were long, filled with thoughts that wouldn't let me sleep. Did I do the right thing? Did I overreact? Could I have resolved everything more discreetly? But then I would remember those folders, those cold notes, that cataloging of women as if they were rare stamps, and the doubt would dissipate. Yes, I had done exactly what I needed to do. In the small coastal town, no one knew me as Arnold Vance's wife. I was just Dorothy, the middle-aged woman who bought the corner house and seemed to have a story to tell. That was liberating. Being able to walk the streets without feeling the looks of pity or curiosity. Being able to shop without hearing whispers. Being able to exist without the weight of the identity I had carried for so many years. In the first months, I lived off the savings I had kept, but I knew I needed to build something new, not just to sustain myself financially, but to fill my days, to give me a purpose. That's how the idea of the tea house was born. In the town where I lived with Arnold, I was known for my culinary skills, especially for the cakes and sweets I prepared for church events and community parties. Why not turn that into a business? The property I found was on the main street. It had been a small clothing store that had recently closed. The rent was reasonable, and the space, although small, had potential. I hired a local carpenter to make some adaptations, counters, shelves, a small kitchen in the back. I bought tables and chairs at an auction from a hotel that was renovating its furniture. In second-hand stores, I found sets of English porcelain, old silverware, lace tablecloths. Each item was carefully chosen to create a welcoming, elegant environment without being pretentious. On the day of the inauguration, in May 1974, I was as nervous as a teenager on the first day of school. I had prepared cakes, pies, cookies, using the recipes I had perfected over decades. I had selected different types of tea, from the traditional to some more exotic ones I found in a specialized store in New York. The first customers were curious women, attracted by the new establishment in the small town where novelties rarely emerged. They came, tried, approved, returned, bringing friends. Soon, Dorothy's Tea, the simple name I chose for the place, became a meeting point for the ladies of the town, especially in the afternoon. Gradually, I got to know my customers. Many were like me, middle-aged or older women, carrying their own stories of pain, overcoming new beginnings. Widows learning to live alone, wives of fishermen who spent months at sea, mothers whose children had moved to big cities in search of opportunities, young wives insecure in their new roles. The tea house transformed into something more than a business. It became a space of welcome, of exchange of experiences, of mutual support. There, between cups of jasmine tea and slices of orange cake, an informal network of female solidarity formed. One afternoon, a lady named Eunice entered the tea house. She must have been about 60, carefully combed gray hair, a discreet elegance in her dress. She sat alone, ordered a tea and a slice of pie. I noticed that her eyes were red, as if she had been crying recently. Normally, I respected the privacy of customers, but something about her touched me, perhaps the recognition of a pain similar to what I had felt. I approached and asked if she was okay, if she needed anything else besides what she had ordered. Eunice hesitated. Then the words came out like a torrent. Her husband of 35 years had left her for a younger woman. He simply came home one day and said he didn't love me anymore, that he needed to live his life. After 3 children raised, after I had dedicated my youth to him, to our home. I sat at her table and shared my own story. Not all the details, not the public humiliation I imposed on Arnold, but the essential, the discovery of the betrayal, the decision not to accept that situation, the courage to start over. "How did you manage?" she asked, wiping away a tear. "How did you find the strength?" "One day at a time," I answered, holding her hands between mine, and discovering that I am much stronger than I ever imagined. Eunice became a frequent customer and eventually a close friend. With time, she recovered from the separation, went back to study, something she had always wanted but her husband had never allowed, and ended up becoming a teacher at the local school. Years later, she confessed to me, "That afternoon in your tea house changed my life. Seeing a woman who had gone through something similar and was not just surviving, but thriving, gave me hope." Stories like Eunice's multiplied over the years. The tea house became known not just for the delicious sweets, but for the supportive and understanding environment. Women came from neighboring towns, sometimes traveling hours, attracted by the reputation of the place. With the growth of the business, I needed to hire help. My first employee was Irene, a young single mother whom the conservative community had practically exiled. No one wanted to hire her, despite her evident intelligence and willingness to work. I gave her an opportunity and never regretted it. Irene had a natural talent for serving customers, a prodigious memory for remembering preferences, and an extraordinary ability to make people feel welcome. Then came Constance, a lady of almost 70 who needed to supplement her meager retirement. Her arthritic hands didn't allow her to work serving tables, but her culinary knowledge was vast. She became my assistant in the kitchen, teaching me old recipes she had learned from her Portuguese grandmother. Each new employee brought her story, her skills, her wounds. Together, we formed a small family of women who supported each other. It wasn't just a workplace, it was a community. In 1976, we expanded the business. The building next door became vacant when the pharmacy moved to larger facilities. I rented the space, we knocked down the wall that separated the two establishments, and Dorothy's Tea doubled in size. Now, in addition to serving teas and sweets in the afternoon, we offered light lunches, quiches, salads, soups, and dinners on weekends. It was during this time that I received the first visit from Regina, my daughter. She had graduated in medicine and was doing a residency at a hospital in New York. She arrived without warning on a rainy Sunday afternoon. I was in the kitchen preparing a batch of scones when Irene came to call me, a mysterious smile on her face. The reunion was emotional. We hugged for a long time. We cried together. We tried to compress 2 years of absence into hurried words that overlapped. Regina looked around, amazed at what I had built. "Mom, this is incredible. You're different. You seem younger, more alive." It was true. Despite the hard work, the long hours, the concerns that every small business owner faces, I felt reinvigorated. I had discovered a Dorothy I didn't know, resilient, creative, capable of facing challenges I had never imagined. Regina spent a week with me, met my employees, my suppliers, my regular customers. We talked a lot, putting into words feelings that had been repressed for years. She told me how difficult it was to accept the truth about her father, how she felt betrayed not just by his infidelity to me, but by the lie that our entire family life had been. "I always thought we had a happy home," she said one night, as we had tea on the porch of my house. "That you were the perfect couple, the example I should follow." Discovering that it was all a farce shook my convictions about everything. I hugged my daughter, feeling her heart beat next to mine. "Not everything was a farce, dear. The love we felt for you children was real. The laughter we shared, the celebrations, the moments of family unity, those were genuine." After Regina's visit, the other children also came. Paul, the oldest, was still hurt by the way I had publicly exposed his father, but gradually our relationship healed. Claude, the youngest, always the most sensitive of the three, spent an entire summer with me, helping in the tea house, charming the customers with his youthful charm. My children noticed that I had changed, and for the better. I was no longer the submissive mother, always worried about pleasing, always putting the needs of others ahead of her own. I was a secure, independent woman who had found her own voice. The 1980s arrived, bringing changes to the country and to my personal life. The United States was experiencing the Reagan era, and there was a feeling of renewal, of possibilities in the air. I was already in my 50s, but I felt younger than at 30 when I lived in Arnold's shadow. The tea house was thriving. We had expanded again, now also offering a small catering service for events. My pies, cakes, and appetizers were requested for birthdays, weddings, graduations. I hired more employees, including a young chef who brought new ideas to the menu. It was during this time that I met Albert, a 60-year-old widower who had moved to town after retiring as a university professor. He began frequenting the tea house, always ordering the same thing: black tea with a slice of apple pie. He would sit by the window, read his newspaper, occasionally exchange a few words with me when I passed by his table. Our relationship grew slowly, organically. It began with casual conversations about the weather, the movement of the town, the news of the day. It evolved into deeper discussions about literature. He was a professor of letters, politics, philosophy. Albert would lend me books. I would offer him new recipes to try. One day, he invited me to a concert in the neighboring town. I hesitated. I hadn't gone out with any man since my separation from Arnold, but I accepted, moved by a curiosity about this new dimension of life that I had left dormant for so long. It was a magical night. The concert was classical music, a small regional orchestra interpreting Mozart and Vivaldi. Afterward, we dined at a simple seaside restaurant where the salty breeze mixed with the aroma of freshly grilled fish. We talked for hours without noticing the time passing. Albert told me about his late wife, about the years of companionship, about the pain of loss. I shared my story, including the public revenge against Arnold, something I rarely mentioned. Instead of judging, he smiled. "What extraordinary courage! Very few women would have the audacity to do what you did." Our relationship evolved naturally. It wasn't the overwhelming passion of youth, but something more mature, more serene, based on mutual respect and shared interests. Albert never moved into my house, nor I into his. We maintained our separate spaces, our independence, but we spent a lot of time together. Concerts, short trips, long walks on the beach, nights talking until dawn. It was a relationship that lasted 15 years until Albert's death in 1995, victim of a cancer that consumed him quickly. His passing left an immense void, but also a profound gratitude for the shared years, for the affection, for the respect he never ceased to demonstrate. Meanwhile, my family was growing. My children married. I had my first grandchildren. Regina gave me 2 granddaughters, Beatrice and Lucy. Paul had 3 children, Ferdinand, Roger, and Marianne. Claude, 2, Gabriel, and Helen. Seeing this new generation grow, helping to care for them during school holidays, participating in their lives even at a distance, brought a joy I cannot describe. As the years passed, I began to delegate more responsibilities at the tea house. Irene, that young single mother I hired in the early years, became the manager. It was fair. No one knew the business as well as she did. No one was as dedicated. In 2003, at 73, I decided to officially retire. I sold the tea house to Irene, facilitating the payment in comfortable installments. It was a peaceful transition. She kept the name, the recipes, the essence of the place. To this day, Dorothy's Tea exists in that coastal town, although it is now managed by Irene's daughter, since she has also retired. Retirement brought me time for activities I had always wanted to explore. I began painting seascapes, mainly inspired by the view from my porch. I joined a reading group at the municipal library. I traveled a bit. I got to know the South, visited the Grand Canyon, spent time with each of my children. In 2010, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Veronica, the young woman in the red dress, the one who appeared at my door on that fateful day in 1973, and without knowing it, triggered the entire transformation in my life. In the letter, she apologized. She told me she had married, had children, grandchildren, built an honest life, that for decades she carried the guilt for the role she played in the destruction of my marriage, that only now, at 60, had she found the courage to write. I responded with sincerity. I thanked her for being involuntarily the catalyst for my liberation. I said I held no grudge, neither against her nor the other women, not even against Arnold, that life is too short to be lived looking back, nurturing old resentments. And it was true. As I aged, I realized more and more clearly that forgiveness is not a gift we give to others, but to ourselves. Forgiving doesn't mean approving what was done, but freeing oneself from the weight of resentment, of the bitterness that poisons only the one who carries it. I learned from my children that Arnold died in 2015 at 88. He lived modestly in a small apartment in a town in the Midwest. He never fully recovered from the scandal, never rebuilt his reputation or his business to the previous level. According to Paul, who visited him occasionally, he frequently talked about the past, about the store he had built, about the social position he had occupied. He rarely mentioned his behavior, his betrayals, as if that part of his history simply didn't exist in his memory. I didn't feel joy at his death, nor deep sadness, just a certain melancholy for the life we could have had if he had been the man he pretended to be. I sent flowers to the funeral, a gesture that surprised many. I couldn't attend. My health no longer allowed long trips, but I asked Regina to represent me. Today, at 93, I look back with serenity. Life has given me many joys, some sorrows, challenges I never imagined facing. I built a business from scratch, created a community, loved again. I saw my children become successful adults, my grandchildren grow, my great-grandchildren be born. If that young Dorothy of 19, who fell madly in love with Arnold at a 4th of July picnic in 1949, could see the woman I became, she would be amazed, not just by the advanced age, by the white hair, by the wrinkles that mark my face like a map of the roads I've traveled, but mainly by the inner strength, by the independence, by the ability to rebuild myself after devastation. The revenge I planned that night in 1973, lying beside a husband who had betrayed me with 50 women, wasn't motivated just by anger, by humiliation, by the desire to make Arnold suffer as I had suffered. It was, above all, an act of liberation, of affirmation of my dignity, of refusal to continue being the silent victim, the betrayed wife who lowers her head and accepts her destiny. It was the moment I decided that my story would not be written by others. It would be written by me, with the words I chose, at the pace I determined. And what a story it was! Full of twists, of overcomings, of discoveries about myself that I never would have made if I had continued in that marriage of appearances. Who would have thought that the greatest betrayal of my life would become, paradoxically, the portal to my true happiness? My dears who are watching me now, this was the story of my life, of how I discovered 50 lovers of my husband, and how that, instead of destroying me, transformed me into the strong woman I am today. If my story touched your heart in some way, please leave your like on this video and subscribe to the Grandma's Diary channel so you don't miss other stories of overcoming like mine. Also, share this video with someone who might be needing a message of hope and strength. And tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I love knowing that my words are reaching people from different places. I would also love to know which part of my story moved you the most, or what lesson you take for your own life. Always remember, it's never too late to start over and write a new story for yourself. I did it at 43, at a time when women rarely had that courage. You can too, no matter your age or situation. Thank you very much for listening to me today. God bless each one of you. Until the next story.